Revit families have a variety of different categories that they fall into, such as doors, windows, and mechanical equipment. Each category affects the way that Revit organizes them as well as schedules them. One of the things that you'll find is that as you're downloading families from online resources, sometimes you'll end up getting an odd category for your Revit family. And it is possible to recategorize those Revit families to meet a category which makes more sense for that kind of component. In this project, if we come up here to the Architecture tab and then select on Window, we'll find on the Type Selector list that right now I have a door showing up underneath my windows. And if I click here on the Type Selector list and scroll up, you can see, in fact, we do have windows on this list as well as doors. Now, the reason why this door shows up here on the Type Selector list is because it's been told to be the wrong category of object. In order to change the category of object, you need to go into the Revit family and adjust it from within the family. Let's just click somewhere out here, and then underneath the project browser, scroll down until we find our window families. Click the little plus sign next to Windows, and from here we can see that we have two different window families. One's a fixed window, and the other one is the mislabeled single flush door. Select on Single Flush Door. I will point out something, and that is if you click on the little plus sign, you'll get a variety of different sizes associated with this door. You don't want to select on any of the sizes. You want to select on the actual name of this family, the single flush door. Right-click, then go to Edit. This opens up the door in the Family Editor. Now, the button that you can select on in order to change the category is Family, Category, and Parameters. When you click on the Family, Category, and Parameters, you can see here that Windows is highlighted. But if we scroll up on the list, we can then select Doors off of the list instead. This happens to be all the different categories that we can choose from in order to load this family into the project and have it scheduled appropriately. And that includes such things as casework, columns, electrical equipment, mechanical equipment, even such things as planting and site work. I want to point out that there's also other properties in here, which they're calling family parameters. Should the door always be vertical? So can it either be at an angle depending on the surface that it's hosted to, or can it be always vertical, straight up and down? Can it be cut by voids? And a variety of other properties just associated with this kind of family. And that includes what kind of object is it hosted on. And in this case, because it's a door, it's always hosted on a wall. But if it was the kind of object that you could adjust what kind of object that it could be hosted on, this is where you could adjust that value. Since I've come up here and then selected doors off the list, if we click on OK, Revit now thinks that this is a door, but we still need to load it into our project. So on the ribbon, over toward the right-hand side, we have two different buttons. One is the Loading the Project. All previous versions of Revit had the Loading the Project button. But with 2016, we also have a Load into Project and Close button, which means it'll load this family into our project and also close this family down, which is what we want to do. So select on Loading the Project and Close. It'll ask, do you want to save any changes to the door? If it does ask you that question, just say yes. It'll say, do you want to replace the existing file? Tell it yes. Do you want to override the existing file? Yes, we do. But after we've done all those different things, if we come up here to Architecture and then select on Door, we'll now see that we have both the single flush and the single flush door now, which is showing up underneath doors. And just to see that it's not still showing up underneath windows, if we come up here to the Architecture tab, click on Window, we'll now see that it no longer shows up on the pull-down list here, the Type Selector list, underneath Windows. There are two main locations where we can adjust the parameters of a Revit family. One location would be inside of the Revit project. The other location is inside of the family itself. To adjust the properties inside of the project, we would need to first activate the command for that family, or select on that family somewhere inside of your project. In this case, I'll go up to the Architecture tab and select on Door. And here we can see the properties of this single flush door. Now, if I replace the single flush door inside of the project now, the instance parameters for that door would be located in this spot. The instance parameters are just those parameters that affect that specific door that you place. Now there's also something called type properties. Type properties will affect all the doors, which are 36 by 84 single flush. So not just the single door that you place, but all the 36 by 84 single flush doors that may already be loaded into the project. And we can find those parameters underneath Edit Type. So when you select on Edit Type, you get the Type Properties dialog box. And from here, you can change such things as the material of the door and the overall size of the door. If we click on OK to this, then just within this project environment, we have those new properties for the single flush door. Now I'm going to click on OK. But the other thing that we could do is modify these properties inside of the family itself. And we can do that if we go to the project browser, scroll down until we find our families, continue to scroll down until we find doors, expand out the doors category, then select on single flush door. Right-click on single flush door, then click on Edit. And now this will open up the door inside of the family editor. Now we can find those type properties that we were looking at a moment before underneath the Create tab by selecting on Family Types. Here in the Family Types dialog box, we can find all the properties associated with that type, in this case 36 by 84, of door. If we wanted to create a new type of door, we could do that from this dialog box. Come over here to Family Types and then click on New. Now instead of a 36 by 84 door, I think that I'll make a small little closet door, so a 24 by 84 door. So type in 24 by 84 and click on OK. Now we can adjust the properties of this size of door. Underneath dimensions, we need to change the width instead of being 3 feet to be 24 inches, or 2 feet. Clicking into these other cells, and we'll see that it automatically updates at 24 inches to be 2 foot. Also, if we would come up where it has name and click on this type selector list, we can choose one of the other types off of the list, and we can see the properties of that type of door. So now we have that new type, the 24 by 84, with the correct width associated with it. Now if we click on OK to that, notice how it automatically updates to have the correct width for the door. And now we have a couple of different options. If we want to use this in other projects, we can come up to Save the door in a location where we can find it, ideally someplace on our network. From there, we can load it into other projects. The other option that we have is just to come over here to Loading the Project and Close. And when we do that, it will load this door immediately into our project. It says, do you want to save the changes to the single flush door? Select on Yes. Do you want to replace the existing file? Select on Yes. And yes, you want to override the existing version. Once you've done that, it doesn't look like much of anything has happened, but if you come up to the door underneath the Architecture tab, you'll now see underneath Properties on the Type Selector list, if we click, we now have a door which is a 24 by 84 door. If we were trying to place that inside of our project, we now have a door of that type available to us. So just remember that there's two different locations where you can adjust these properties. One is inside the project itself. That's just by selecting on the door, going to Edit Type, and then editing its properties from here. Your other option is to go into the project browser, find the family that you want to adjust, right-click on it, select on Edit. Then at that point, you can adjust the properties directly inside of the family. And from there, you can either save it out of the project to use on future projects, or you can load that family back into your current project to have the new type of door available to you inside of the project. A template contains all of your initial project settings, and we can open up one of our templates by either coming over here to Projects and selecting on New, or by going up to the big R, highlighting on the word New, and then selecting Project. This will open up the New Project dialog box. Here we have Template File, and we can choose one of the default template files that comes with Revit, or we can get a bigger list of those default template files by selecting on the Browse button. And from here, we'll have a listing of all the template files that came loaded with Revit. including custom residential content, custom commercial, and a variety of other kinds of templates that we could use. For this example, though, I'm just going to select on Cancel, come here to the pull-down menu, and select on Architectural Template. From here, if we wanted to create a new project, we could just make sure that project was highlighted. But what I'd really like to do instead is to create a new project template. So to accomplish that, I'll select on this dot and then click on OK. And now it will create a new project template based off of that template that we just had highlighted. Now underneath the project browser, we can see that we have floor plans, ceiling plans, elevations, but we can also have the default sheets loaded, default schedules inside of the template, and we can also set up all of our line styles, dimension styles, and all that information inside of the template as well. And you can find much of that information underneath the Manage tab and select on Additional Settings. Now this is a very long menu. In fact, it's actually starting to fall right off of the bottom of the screen here. But what we can see is that from here we can set our fill patterns, which are our hatch patterns, our different line styles, line weights, line patterns, the different symbology for our elevations and section tags. And we can also start to make changes to the settings for our dimension styles and a variety of other different kinds of settings that would affect the final output of our drawing sheets. So our template contains all the initial project information that we need whenever we first start a project. A title block is just a Revit family, but it's a Revit family with a lot of information inside of it, including text, labels, line styles. It can have filled regions inside of it. It may even have images and schedules. To see some of these things, let's zoom into this title block. In this location, we have a schedule. All the lines that we see are line work. Any piece of text that we select on that cannot be changed is text. All the text that we select on that can be changed is considered a label. And we even have an image inside of this title block up toward the top where we have the Autodesk symbol. So if we wanted to make any changes to the title block, we could select on the title block, then come up here to Edit Family, and it'll open up the title block in the Family Editor. Let's zoom in toward the bottom of the title block. And what I'd like to do is add a piece of text to this location, which has the location of which this file is located at. To do that, we'll need a label. So underneath the Create tab, select on Label. When we do, we can see that we have underneath Properties on the Type Selector list the different sizes of text that this label could be. And right now, it looks like the smallest one that we have is 1/8 of an inch, and that's a little bit bigger than what I'd like. I'd like to create a 3/32 of an inch piece of text label. So click where it has 1/8 of an inch, and then select on Edit Type. Duplicate, then type in 3/32 of an inch, and click on OK. For the size of this text, click here where it has 1/8 of an inch, and change that to 3/32 of an inch. If you wanted to change the font to be a different font, we could select where it has Arial and then pick any of our system fonts off of the list. This is also where we can change the color of the text, the line weight associated with the text, as well as the overall width factor of the text. And the same information applies if we be modifying any of the labels in our project, as well as any of the rest of the text inside of the project. Now if we click on OK, we now have that 3/32 of an inch label, and what I'd like to do is place the label in this location. I'm just going to click to place the label there. What we need to have is the file name. So let's scroll down here where we have the category parameters. And instead of the file name, I could just say, let's select on File Path, and then click this arrow which points to the right, which will add that parameter to the label. If we click on OK to that, we'll now have File Path available to us. I'll hit escape a couple times on the keyboard just to get out of the command and select on that small piece of text. What I'd like to do now is rotate it around. So with the piece of text selected, we'll click on the little arrow there, and then just hold the mouse button down and then spin this file path around. Now file paths can sometimes get to be fairly long. So I'm going to click on the dot and then pull that dot all the way up to that point. Now if we click and then move this into place by just holding down our mouse button, we can now place that file path at this location. Now, because this is a label, it will automatically try to update itself with whatever the information is associated with the file path. To see this in action, I'm going to select on Loading the project and close. It'll ask, do we want to save the changes? Tell it yes, and then save this family inside of your Chapter 3 folder. Overwrite the existing version. Now if I zoom out and then zoom in down here, I now have the file path available where my file is currently saved. So the label is automatically updated based off of the information associated with the project. And that's the same concept as what's happening here with the project number, issue date, and author. If we click in here, we can type in any information that we would like, such as our initials, click, and now that's information that's now associated with information in the project. If you wanted to continue to edit information inside of the title block, you can select on the title block, come up here to Edit Family, and then adjust any of this information to where it needs to be adjusted to. I'll also point out that if we needed to move any of the information, because like in this case, my file path looked like it was pretty close to my date, I could always select on the file path and then either move it to a new location or use the arrow keys on my keyboard to just nudge it to a more appropriate spot. If we needed to add lines to this title block, we could do that as well. So let's zoom in right above where this schedule is located at. This is actually a revision schedule that's loaded into the title block. To add a line to the title block, we come up here to the Create tab and then select on Line. Pick what type of line we'd like to use, medium, thin, or wide. In this case, though, I think I'll use title block lines. And then pick a spot where we'd like that line to be, such as right here. Come straight over, click again. Hit the escape key a couple times to get out of the command, and now we have an extra line in here where we could put our architectural seal or some other piece of information. We also have the capability to add custom information to the title block, in this case, custom labels. Right now, if we would zoom into where we have our consultant information, this is just pieces of text. But maybe we wanted to insert in a consultant piece of information that was actually a label. To do that, we can select on the text, hit the delete key on the keyboard, come up here to Create, and then select on Label. We have to choose where we want the label to be located at, as well as the size of text for that. Let's make this be an 1/8-inch piece of text, and then click in that location. One of the things you'll find is that for the default category parameters, consultant information is not one of the default parameters. To accomplish this, we need to create our own custom parameter. And to do that, we can select on Add Parameter. It's going to say that we need to create a shared parameter for this, and we need to select on the Select button. It'll most likely tell you that you do not have a shared parameter file, and do you want to choose one now? If you tell it yes, you can then create a new one. So by selecting on Create, what I'd like to call this is just Shared Parameter. Technically, it can be called anything that you'd like it to be, but shared parameter is appropriate for what we're doing. Click on Save. We'll create a new shared parameter group. Click on New, and I'll just name this Title Block. Click on OK. Now we need to create a new parameter. So we select on New. Let's name it Consultant Name. We'll leave the discipline at Common, but if we selected a different discipline off of the list, you'd have any parameters associated with that type of discipline available to us. But we just want this to be a common parameter, and for the type of parameter, make sure that it's a text parameter. When it's text, it means you can type in whatever the name is inside of that parameter field. Click on OK to that. Click on OK. Click on OK. And now we can see that we have a new parameter called Consultant Name. If we click on OK, you can now add that over here to the right. I highlighted on the consultant name, clicking on Add Parameters to Label, then clicking on OK. We hit Escape a couple times on the keyboard to get out of the command. We can now see that in fact we have consultant name, and we should load that into the project. It'll ask, do you want to save it? And I'll say yes to that. Yes, I'll overwrite the existing one, the one that we saved a minute ago. Overwrite the existing version. I'll zoom out. There's the line that we added. And you'll notice that we don't seem to have any text up here inside of our title block area. Well, the reason why that is if we select on the title block, we get this little question mark. But unfortunately, we can't just click on that question mark a few times in order to modify it. And I just double clicked on it a couple of times and ended up opening it up inside the family editor. So I'm going to close the family editor down. I'll say no to that. What we need to do now is add that parameter to our project itself. To accomplish that, we now need to come up here to the Manage tab, then select on Project Parameters. Here in Project Parameters, we need to add that parameter that we just created for the title block to our project environment. So we'll select on Add, click on Shared Parameter, click on Select, make sure that consultant name has been highlighted, and now the consultant name has been added to our project. Over here toward the right-hand side, we actually have two different options that we can select on. We can either make this be a piece of project information, which means it'll populate on every sheet, or we can make this sheet information, which means on each individual sheet, we can click there and then give a different consultant name for each individual sheet. What I like to do is make this populate throughout the entire project. So I'm going to put a check mark next to project information. But if we had wanted to make this vary per sheet, we would have put a check mark next to sheets instead. Now I'm going to click on OK. Click on OK. And now that piece of information, that shared parameter has been added to our project, it means that we can now select on our title block, click where that little question mark is located at, and then type in whatever the consultant's name needs to be. And I'm just going to type in consultant's name and click somewhere out here. Now, the reason why we needed to do that is that this is a shared parameter. It shares its information between the project and the Revit family. That's why it's called a shared parameter. It shares it between two different things inside of Revit. By doing these steps, we can add line work to a title block. We can start to add our own custom labels to it. We can add text, and we can generally customize the Revit title block to fit our needs. Revit provides us with the flexibility to add a title block stamp, which can be not for construction, or someone's seal to the title block so that it can be turned on or off. In this example, let's go through the process of adding an individual seal to the title block so that it can be turned on or off. To accomplish that, let's start by zooming into the area where we'd like to add the seal. In this case, I want to add that seal between the consultant information and the revision information in the title block. Next, I'm going to select on the title block and come up here to Edit Family. Now this will actually open up the title block family itself. Next, let's zoom into that same area here inside of the title block family. And now what we need to do is create a new family. This new family will be a generic annotation family. So come up to the big R, highlight on New, and then select on Family. Go to Annotations, and then scroll down until you find your generic annotation family, and click on Open. If you zoom in, you'll see that there's a note that says you need to delete this note. The reason why it says you need to delete this note is because this red text will show up inside of the family. So if you wanted to create a stamp that said not for construction, you'd use the same technique, which would be to come up here to create and use a piece of text, just like how the red text was a piece of text, and then type not for construction here inside of this generic annotation family. One of the more common questions that gets asked is, how do I modify the properties of my view title? So my view title has a different look about it. The reason why I get asked a lot is because if you select on the view title, you'll notice that you do not get the option to edit a family. To actually edit the view title, the first thing you need to do is find out which view title is it. So with the view title actually selected, come over here to Edit Type, and then you'll see an option here for Title. And this will be the actual name of the family of the view title. In this case, it's called View Title. There's also options in here for, do you want to show the view title? Do you need to show certain line weights for the view title, the color of the title, and that kind of information. But if you want to modify the view title itself, you'll need to do it through the family. So to get to the family, you need to select on OK. Then under the project browser, scroll down until you find families. Expand out families, expand out annotation symbols, and then start to look for that view title family. If you scroll down toward the bottom, you'll find view title. Now it'll be tempting to select a little plus and then try to right click on the title name right here. This is actually the incorrect thing to do, because if you right click on that name, you'll never get the option for edit. To actually edit the view title itself, you need to right click on the title name right above that name and then select on edit. And now that'll take us into the view title family. The piece of information that I'd like to modify on the view title is the overall size of the view name. Usually the view name is about double the size of the scale, so that's what I'd like to do, make it twice the size of the existing scale. With this label selected, come up here to Edit Type, and we can find out the properties associated with this label. Right now, this is an Arial font, which is 1/8 of an inch in size. Let's see if there are any other size labels available to us. So if we come up here to label, we can see right now that there's nothing else here on the pull down menu. What I'd like to do is select on duplicate. For the name of this label, I'm just going to call it corner inch and click on OK. Now that corner inch has been selected, we can come down here to the text size, change that to be a quarter inch, change the font, make it bold, italic, change the width. This is where we would accomplish that. Click on OK. And now we can see that the title name is twice the size that it was. Also, if we needed to do any drawing, add any other extra information, we could do that from here. We go to the Create tab. This is where you have your line work tools, symbols, filled regions, masking regions, text, labels. Any piece of information you'd like to be a part of this will be the area where you can add it. Once you're done drawing the way you'd like it to look, come up here to load in the project, and then load that back into your project. It'll ask, do you want to overwrite the existing version? Yes, you do. And then if you zoom in, you'll see that any changes that you've made have now been applied to that view title. Remember, if you need to make modifications to your view title, you always need to do it inside of the family. And the easiest way to find out which family is being used is just to select on the title, come up to Edit Type underneath Properties, and from there, next to Title, it'll tell you which title is being used so that you can find it underneath your project browser. When setting up our Revit templates or Revit projects, one of the first things we need to do is make sure that we have the right size and style of font available to us in Revit. Now that font is a text style or a text type inside of Revit. So we can find those underneath the Annotate tab, and then next to the word text, there's a little down arrow for text types. Select on that little down arrow to open up the Type Properties dialog box. From here, we can find all the different types of text and the properties which are currently loaded into this Revit project. If we select on the pull-down menu next to Type, we'll see that we have 3 different types of text: quarter-inch Arial, 3/32 Arial, and something they're calling Schedule Default. Now, if we change it to Schedule Default, we'll be able to see the properties of the text that by default goes into our schedules. Here in the Type Parameters area, down below Text, we can see that there's currently a text font, which is Arial, and its text size for the Schedule Default is 1/8 of an inch. What I'd like to do is duplicate this text type and then make this a Times New Roman font. So to accomplish that, we'll come up here to the Duplicate button. Let's call this type of text Times New Roman and click on OK. Next to Text Font, click where it has Arial, click the little pull down arrow, and then scroll down until you find your Times New Roman font. If for some odd reason your computer does not have Times New Roman, just pick a different font off of the list. Over 99% of the computers in the world do have Times New Roman, so let's just select on the Times New Roman font. For the text size, we'll leave it at 1/8 of an inch. That's just fine. If we had wanted to make this bold or italic or underline, this is where we could do those properties. Revit does not have a fit command for its text, so if you want to have the text be a little bit more narrow, this is where you would specify 0.8 or 0.7 for the width factor. Finally, if you want to specify for this kind of text, have this kind of leader associated with it, this is where you can specify your leader arrowhead and then pick a different arrowhead off of the list. In this case, just so that we can see it, let's scroll down. And what I think I'll do is pick this box-filled 3/32 of an inch. Finally, I'll click on OK. And now we have that new font that's currently part of our project. If we wanted to place a piece of text inside the project just to see the way that it looks, we can select on Text from underneath Annotate, click on one of these arrowhead options. In this case, I'll select the 2 segment, pick a base point, click here, come over here, and then type just a few letters of the alphabet. Zoom in. Right now, this font is still the Arial font with the little arrowhead on the end. And the reason is when I executed the text command, I did not change what type of text I wanted to use underneath properties. But if I select on the text right now and click, we can see that Times New Roman is now one of our options. If we select on that and click off of it, we can see that we now have that Times New Roman font as well as that square for the arrowhead. If we wanted to make adjustments to it now, we could. Select back on the piece of text, come over here to Edit Type. For the leader arrowhead, I really don't want the box filled. Maybe I want to use an arrow again. So I'll scroll up, select on this arrow 30 degrees. And for the text size, maybe instead of 1/8 of an inch, I'd want to use 3/32 of an inch instead. If I click on OK to that, we can now see it's updated the arrowhead, and it's also updated the size of the text here inside of the project environment. Finally, I can select on this piece of text, click on Delete and delete it. But even though we've done that, it's still part of our project or part of our template. And we can find that by, once again, coming up here to the Text Types down arrow, click on this pull-down menu, and from here we can see that we still have our Times New Roman with the settings that we applied to it. Revit allows us to customize the way that our dimensions display. To see the difference in our dimensions, let's start by zooming into our floor plan view and take a look at our current dimension string. Right now, I just have a dimension going from the end of a wall to the center of a window over to the other end of the wall. And what we'll do is modify this dimension string so that it has a different look to it. Now, technically, I could just select on the dimension string and then go to Edit Type in order to edit its properties. But if we wanted to make a change inside of a typical template, what I usually like to do is go to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, then select the word dimension. From this pull-down menu, we now have the variety of different types of dimensions that we can modify, including our linear dimensions. Let's select on linear dimension types. And from here, we can see the type properties of this linear 3/32 aerial dimension, which happens to be the same kind of dimension that I currently have dimensioning this wall and windows. Well, notice underneath the type parameters that there's a leader type, which can be set as either being an arc or a line. And what this means is that if we pull away this dimension so there'd be up and over, there'll be a little arc that follows that dimensional number and ties it back to the dimension string. And should that be an arc or a straight line? There's also an option there for that leader that would get created if you would move the dimension over. Does it need to have a tick mark on the end of it? Or would you like to assign some sort of arrow or a dot or a filled box that would be pointing right back there at your dimension string? There are also options for adjusting the tick marks themselves at either end of the dimension string. So if we wanted to adjust the tick marks from being a diagonal to being an arrow, we could do that by selecting where we have the diagonal 1/8 of an inch, going to the pull-down menu, and then choosing arrow filled 20 degrees off of the list. We can adjust the line weight of the dimension. We can also adjust the overall line weight of the tick mark that makes up the dimension. There are more properties, including the witness lines, which are the straight up and down lines that the dimensions actually go to, as well as center line symbols. This means in the case of this dimension going to the window, it's going to the center of the window, which means that we could have a little CL or some other kind of symbol right over the top of our dimension string to indicate this is the center of that object. So let's go to the center line symbol, where it has the word none, click, and then choose center line off the list. You can also change the way the interior tick mark looks, change the overall color of the dimension string. We have options related to text. If you want the text to be a little bit more narrow, such as this 28 feet 0 inches, maybe that's a little bit wider than what you'd like. So let's make this be 0.8 instead. We can have the text be underlined, italic, or bold. We can adjust the overall text size associated with the dimension string. We can adjust the font. Also, we can adjust the units which are used. And if I select where it has this 1 foot 5 and 11/32 inch, from here we can clear the checkbox for use project settings, and then we could choose any of the units that we'd like that dimension to display. So even though your project may have units of metric, you could choose feet and inches. If your project had feet and inches as the units, so imperial units, you could adjust this to be metric instead. But I want to use the project settings for this top dimension. We'll click on OK at that. But I would like to add an alternate unit to this dimension string. So let's click where it has this none, and we want to place that alternate unit below the dimension string. We also would have the option to place it to the right of the dimension string. For the alternate unit format, make sure that it's set to millimeters. As for decimal places, you can make this be as many decimal places as you'd like for this dimension. I'm just going to click on OK to that, and we can see that there's still more properties a little bit further down. These are all the different properties that you can adjust in order to create these changes to your dimension strings. And if you wanted the changes to a different dimension style, you could do that as well. Just come up here to the type and select the dimension style that you'd like to adjust, whether it be arc or diagonal or linear, and then you can adjust the properties accordingly for that type of dimension. What I'm going to do is make sure that this is still on the linear 3/32 of an inch area, and then click on OK. By doing that, we can now see that we have that extra center line that got added. We have the arrows now instead of the tick marks. Also, we have the alternate units, the millimeters, underneath their dimension. Now, if we would use this template for future projects, it would hold these settings. So the next time we'd run a dimension string, it would have these settings applied to it. I'll also point out that if you want to make any other adjustments, you can come up here to the dimension, and then for your angular, radial, diameter dimensions, as well as some of your spot elevations. You can adjust those properties as well, adjusting the same types of properties that we just looked at, and then save those to your template so that all your future projects have those settings associated with them. Structural grids and levels are handled in Revit in a very similar way. That includes the properties that make up both the levels and the structural grids, which is one of the reasons why your levels and grids are grouped together underneath the Architecture tab on the Revit. If we needed to see the properties of our levels, we could select where we have one of our existing levels, such as Level 2 here on our North Elevation view. Then go to Edit Type. Here in the Type Properties dialog box, we can find all the different properties that make up this type of level. Currently, it has a color, which is black, a line weight, which is assigned to be 1. But if we need the line weight to be darker, this is where we could change it to be a 2 or a 3 or a larger number. The line pattern, that's the reason why it looks like a center line, or in this case, you're going to call it a grid line 1/2 of an inch. If you wanted to change that symbology so it had a slightly different look, you could do that by just clicking on the little arrow over here to the right, then scrolling until you find the kind of line that you'd like to use. Select that off of the list, and that will be your new line type for your levels. The symbology, in this case, it's a symbol, and it has level head dash circle. And that indicates the circular shape that we have here for the level head, as well as the text associated with the level head. Now, if we need to make any changes either to that circle or to the overall size and information associated with the level head, what we need to do is get out of this dialog box. We can see that it's called Level Head Circle, so we can click on OK. Then underneath the project browser, if we scroll down till we find our families, expand our annotation symbols, because technically this is still text, and any piece of text is considered an annotation symbol. We can scroll down until we find our level heads, and we have 2 different ones that we can choose from. But the one that we need to edit is the level head circle, which is the one that was referenced inside the level. Now, a common mistake that people will make is they'll click on the little plus sign because they see it next to level head circle, And then they'll try to edit this family by clicking on this type, which is underneath the family. Their mistake is that they'll right-click and then try to find edits, and they won't be able to find edits in order to modify the family. And the reason is that edit only shows up if you select on the name of the family itself, not the type, but the name of the family. Then if you right-click, you can select on Edit in order to edit the family. Inside of the family editor, we can use our lines, filled regions, labels, and text to create any kind of symbology that we'd like for our level heads. In this example, though, what I'd like to do is just adjust the overall size of a name. I select down the word name, I'll come over here to Edit Type. And then what I'd like to do is duplicate this 1/8" piece of text to give us another piece of text which is a little bit larger. So let's select on Duplicate and type in 3/16 inch. Click on OK. For the text font, we'll leave it as Arial, but if we wanted to change the font associated with our levels, this is where we could do it. For the size of text, I'll make this be 3/16 inch. I'll click on OK, and notice how it's gotten much larger now. Now I like the way that this piece of text looks, so let's load it back into the project and see how it adjusts. So if we select on Load into Project, overwrite the existing version, and now you'll notice that all of our level heads are a little bit larger than the elevations associated with it, just like what was inside of that family. And of course, we could have adjusted the way that any of our symbology looked. So if we needed this symbol to be a little bit larger, we could have used our line work tool or used our scale tool in order to either scale up that symbol or draw in a new circle so that we had a more appropriate symbol for the kind of documentation we'd like to have. Now these same properties apply to our structural grids. If we select on the structural grid A, go to Edit Type, you'll notice that this has most of the same types of properties as what our levels had, including symbology, what the line width should be, and the colors. If we wanted to make a modification to the symbol, we could go to the grid head dash circle and then make a modification there. So I'll just click on OK. Underneath the project browser, scroll down. Once again, we need to go to our annotation symbols. These are grid heads. In this case, it's a grid head circle. Select on grid head circle, right-click, click on Edit. And then from here, we could either use our scale command, change the label, add some text. We could add our lines, which would allow us to draw in circles, or rectangles, or whatever shape that we would like. And just use our general drafting commands in order to modify the symbology so it looked correct for our standards. Whenever we were done, we could just load that into the project and it would automatically update for each of those structural grids. Now I haven't actually made any changes, so what I'll do is I'll just click on the little X here in order to exit out. I don't want to save any changes, so I'll select on No. But if we had made any changes, we now see those update for that structural grid. If we wanted to choose a different family instead of the one that we just modified, we could do that as well. Just select on the structural grid, come over here to Edit Type, where it has Symbol. You can click in there and then pick a different symbol off of the list that can be used for our structural grids. One last thing that I didn't say is that we also have this in-segment pattern, which would allow us to change that dashed line to be a typical center line, a solid line, or any pattern that we needed for that structural grid bubble. I'm going to click on OK. And finally mention that any place those families would show up, they'll now updated in all the views. An example of that would be is if we went to the east elevation view, those same changes that we made back in the north are now showing up each of our other elevation views.